Welcome to the Dark Stream. I'm Vox Day. I would refer to myself as an ex-libertarian. I still have a lot of libertarian ideals, but at this point in time, I would simply just describe myself as alt-right. Trump has been the best president about keeping his promises. That's just fucking stupid. I mean, I've said for a long time that feminism is actually worse than communism. We are making a difference in the cultural war. There's a tremendous amount of anti-white rhetoric. You're wrong. You're just flat out wrong.
Some of the issues with cultural Marxism and
SJWs are using cultural Marxism, multiculturalism, and globalism. Globalism, the cucks, conservatives, cucks. Globalism, multiculturalism, internationalism, globalism.
the whole debate over cultural Marxism.
Oh great, another Nazi. Well, this one should be fun. Hello there everybody and welcome to episode 41. That's right, 40 fucking one, as if we've got this far, of The Descent of Man-osphere. The series where I take you through the ways in which the manosphere and its utterly disgusting, reprehensible douchebag inhabitants are trying to reverse human evolution and drag us all back into the fucking sea. And today we're going to be taking a look at supposedly one of the intellectual powerhouses of the alt-right. And apparently they actually believe that's not an oxymoron somehow. Yes, he's an American nationalist, so obviously he lives in Italy. Yes, it's the human colostomy bag, occasionally known as Vox Day! And isn't it funny just how many of these anti-immigration people are actually immigrants themselves? I mean, it's almost like they're totally full of fucking shit or something. And yes, Vox Day is one of them, and by the way, that's not doxing, he's perfectly open about the fact that he lives in Italy. Anyways, Vox Day is a white nationalist, alt-right, identitarian, ethno-nationalist prick. He's also a fantasy sci-fi type novelist, although his fantasy work seems to be less fictional than his supposedly non-fiction writing. Trust me, I've read his book entitled SJWs Always Lie. And it's a load of old bollocks. And by the way, when he says in the title of that book that they always lie, he means they literally always lie. I mean, this guy's a fucking maniac. His grasp on reality is frankly non-existent. And in addition to being a shit author, he's also a game developer and a book publisher. In fact, his publishing house is responsible for much of the alt-right shit that has been infecting bookstores for the last couple of years. He also runs a couple of blog websites, which will become more relevant in a little while. But the first thing to note about Vox is how pathetically desperate he is for everyone to see him as intelligent.
I'm able to suppress my emotional reactions with intellect. My intellect is in excess of the 30-point IQ gap. I've been a nationally syndicated columnist 3 times. I was the 6th columnist ever nationally syndicated from that newspaper.
Yeah, Vox, no one gives a shit that you used to write about tech for a shitty little newspaper in Minnesota over 20 fucking years ago. Firstly, because it's a shitty little newspaper in Minnesota. Secondly, because it was over 20 fucking years ago. And thirdly, and possibly most importantly, is because it's got fuck all to do with your current activities, okay? Back then you were writing about technology, not politics, and you were just a fucking shit-for-brains libertarian then anyway. If you were writing then your neo-Nazi white nationalist bullshit that you write now, you'd be just as unemployable as you are now. But you weren't, so it isn't relevant, so basically, shut the fuck up about it. And look, I'm not saying that Vox Day is entirely fucking stupid. He isn't, okay? He's actually quite well read, albeit that the stuff he tends to read is sort of white nationalist shit, along with kind of histories of wars and things, and he's just a dickhead, basically. But I'm not saying he's totally fucking stupid. I am, however, saying that he massively overestimates his own intelligence. And that's obviously just a technique he uses to protect his pathetically fragile man-baby ego. An ego that is arguably only slightly less pathetic than his political hero, one Donald J. Trump. And yes, he is a childishly eager supporter of the Trumpelstiltskin. He even has a special little nickname for him. See if you can spot it.
The God Emperor of the alt-right, one of the most important things that the God Emperor has done, because the God Emperor is only warming up. This is probably the most important thing you need to keep in mind about the God Emperor. What's happening with the God Emperor's new reign? Donald Trump, already, after only a few months in office, is already the greatest president since Calvin Coolidge. He is already the best president since Calvin Coolidge. The God Emperor. God Emperor.
Yes, Vox Day, the grown adult, describes Donald Trump as the God Emperor. What a pathetic wanker he is. And it's obvious that he would be a supporter of Trump anyway when you note the fact that his name, Vox Day, is Latin for the voice of God. And with levels of humility that non-existent, he was bound to love Trump, wasn't he? And it is to his pathetically fanatical support of Trump that we turn for... Yes, it's the inevitable bit about rape. I hate all things. Everywhere is ugliness. But anyways, this is from a post Vox put up in late 2016. It's from his laughably named website, Alpha Game. And as you can see there, the tagline for the site is breaking the chains, winning the games, and saving Western civilization. Ugh, what a fucking dickhead Vox Day is. Anyways, in the post, he talks about the Access Hollywood tape that was released a few weeks before the US presidential elections, which revealed Donald Trump bragging about having sexually assaulted women by, quote, grabbing them by the pussy, unquote. And, of course, being the Trump drone that he is, Vox obviously tried to defend the tangerine sex pest in a post on his website entitled Government by Gamma Male. The article itself will be read by one of the foremost voice actors of his generation, the indescribably delicious Michael Rowlands. Anyways, take it away, Mikey Poos.
This exchange at Instapundit concerning Donald Trump's alpha talk about women 11 years ago sums up the dire straits of US society.
Whoa there. Sorry to interrupt you, weirdly Russian-sounding version of Vox Day. But I do have to say, alpha talk? That's how you describe men bragging about sexually assaulting women. Just alpha talk. You really are scum, aren't you? But anyways, by all means, please continue.
So, Trump speaks like all men behind closed doors and is somehow a pig? I've never spoken like that, or even thought it. Well then, you are a small minority, a priest or a nun. I am a better quality of man than you are. This summarizes the Gamma Male. He is a better quality of male because he doesn't even think about women in a sexual manner.
Whoa there again, okay? Sorry to interrupt you for a second time, weirdly Russian-sounding version of Vox Day. People weren't angry with Trump because he thought about women in a sexual way, okay? It was the genital grabbing thing. It was the whole, sexual assaulty thing, the rapey thing that, he was caught saying on those tapes. It was that they were annoyed about. Vox. Yeah? Do you get it now? Of course you fucking don't. Anyways. Continue!
Of course, he is not even a man at all. If we refer to him in original Deutsch, we need to say das Gamma to reflect his neutered state.
It's very appropriate, Vox, that you post on this blog under the name VD, because you really are an irritating prick. Now, as I said at the beginning, Vox Day is seen, rather oxymoronically, as an intellectual force within the alt-right, and has also written a manifesto of sorts for the movement. Entitled What the Alt-Right Is, it was posted on his other blog site, which is entitled Vox Populi, presumably called that because he doesn't just think of himself as the voice of God, but also the voice of the people. I mean, seriously, what a fucking wanker. But anyways, yeah, the article itself has been accepted as broadly representative of the alt-right ideology, if it can even really be described as an ideology, but whatever. It has been accepted as broadly representative of the alt-right by leaders within the alt-right, including the likes of Richard Spencer. So even though there isn't a definitive manifesto or guide to what the alt-right is, this is the closest thing that yet exists. So we're going to take a look over it as a way of exploring the thinking of Vox Day and his alt-right fellow travellers. And the article itself will be read by the majestic Marylander himself, yes, Steve Shives. Take it away, S-Bomb.
What the alt-right is. In the interest of developing a core alt-right philosophy upon which others can build. 1. The alt-right is of the political right in both the American and the European sense of the term.
I'm not sure how you can be of the right in both the European and American senses, because those are both quite different things, especially given that you're an ethno-nationalist, and the ethnicities of Europe and America are quite different. Even the white people, and I know you think white people are basically all the fucking same, but they're not. And that's one of the reasons that white nationalism is a fucking joke.
Socialists are not alt-right.
Well, obviously. I mean, did you really need to even fucking say that? Don't pad your work out, alright? That's poor form.
Progressives are not alt-right.
Yeah.
Liberals are not alt-right.
Well, fucking obviously, you dickhead.
Communists, Marxists, Marxians, cultural Marxists, and neocons are not alt-right.
Firstly, Box, what's the difference between Marxists and Marxians? Well, of course, you're just putting that in there to make yourself seem more clever than you actually are. Silly me. Secondly, cultural Marxists aren't actually a thing, so they can't be of the alt-right or any other political persuasion. And thirdly, you say that you're different to the neocons, and whilst there are some differences, there are a lot of similarities. Far more similarities, I dare say, than the alt-right would want to admit, but they're very much there.
Number 2. The alt-right is an alternative to the mainstream conservative movement in the USA that is nominally encapsulated by Russell Kirk's 10 conservative principles, but in reality has devolved towards progressivism. It is also an alternative to libertarianism.
In what possible sense has conservatism devolved, to use your wording, toward progressivism? I mean, you live in your own little fucking fantasy land of your own creation in your head, don't you? Also, it's interesting there that he brings up that the alt-right is an alternative to libertarianism, because actually most of the alt-right, or at least most of the kind of leading vocal figures of the alt-right, came out of libertarianism. They used to be libertarian, which for me shows what I've said for a long time actually, that libertarianism is basically a gateway drug to fascism. Plus, the only discernible difference that I can really see between the alt-right and libertarianism is that the alt-right oppose absolutist free trade. Not because they oppose the economic injustice involved in all of that. No, nothing silly like that. Nothing ethical, no. It's to do with the fact that with absolutist free trade comes absolute free movement of labour. And these guys have a massive hate boner for immigration. So basically these guys have looked at libertarianism and thought to themselves, I like the economic slavery thing, but yeah, they're just not racist enough for me. Yeah, fucking mental.
Number 3. The alt-right is not a defensive attitude and rejects the concept of noble and principled defeat.
Well, that's not quite true now, is it, Vox? Because the alt-right's total and utter refusal to accept that any defeat or setback has actually fucking happened is itself very much a psychological self-defense mechanism to soothe the ludicrously fragile man-baby egos of these total fucking pricks. So in that sense, it very much is a defensive attitude.
It is a forward-thinking philosophy of offense, in every sense of that term.
Don't talk shit, okay? The alt-right couldn't be more backward-looking if it tried, and boy, how it fucking tries. To the point where I've heard leading alt-right figures, you included, Vox, for fuck's sake, try to defend the frankly ridiculous Victorian concept of scientific racialism. For fuck's sake.
The alt-right believes in victory through persistence and remaining in harmony with science.
Global warming and racial IQ differences, anyone?
And remaining in harmony with science, reality,
Cultural Marxism?
cultural tradition, and the lessons of history.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that whole learning the lessons of history thing. I mean, didn't we already try your brand of racial supremacist bullshit once? And didn't it lead to the most destructive war that humanity has ever fucking engaged in? Yeah, I wonder what lessons we might learn from that, Vox.
Number 4. The alt-right believes Western civilization is the pinnacle of human achievement and supports its 3 foundational pillars. Christianity.
How the fuck is Christianity one of the pillars of Western civilization at all? Because, I mean, you and your fucking ilk constantly make reference, and indeed you do later in this point, to the Greco-Roman legacy. Which means that you draw Western civilization back, and indeed I think fairly, to pre-Christianity. So if it was founded by pre-Christians, and it exists now when America, the leading Western nation, is secular, and Europe has vastly moved away from religiosity in recent centuries, and yet Western civilization is still very much in place, how the fuck is Christianity key to any of it? It just isn't, you fucking fundamentalist prick.
The European nations and the Greco-Roman legacy.
It depends what you mean by European nations. Now, if you mean European nation states, then no. Because a very similar historical objection can be raised against that concept as I just did with Christianity. But if you mean the peoples of Europe, then sort of no again, because really that's changed vastly over the centuries. That's again another reason that white ethno-nationalism is a fucking joke. So you'd have to actually pinpoint what you mean by the peoples of Europe. I know you mean just white people, okay? But I'd like to hear what other rationale you'd be able to fucking put up in its place in order to pretend that you're not just being a neo-Nazi prick.
5. The alt-right is openly and avowedly nationalist. It supports all nationalisms and the rights of all nations to exist, homogeneous and unadulterated by foreign invasion and immigration.
Yeah, avowedly nationalist learns the lessons of history. Avowedly nationalist learns the lessons of history. Avowedly, you fucking idiots. Also, he brings up there, in a sort of roundabout way, the alt-right concept of omni-nationalism, which is basically the support for nationalism for each ethnic group around the world, which itself is a sort of weird, almost politically correct version of nationalism. It's basically a rather dumb concept for a couple of main reasons. Firstly, and most glaringly, you can't support two or more ethnic claims of right of settlement over the same piece of land at the same time. It's just impossible, okay? For instance, Zionist Jews and Palestinian Arabs both make religious, ethnic claims to the same tiny piece of land in what is now the modern-day nation of Israel. So how the fuck can you possibly support an entirely homogeneous Jewish state and an entirely homogeneous Arab state, both existing in the same tiny piece of land at the same time? It isn't actually possible, okay? And that's just one example, for fuck's sake. I mean, there are so many of these ethno-territorial overlaps that your idea is basically unworkable at best. And that's without even getting into the ethical and moral problems with your disgusting approach to things. And secondly, there is the issue of how this ethnic homogeneity would be achieved. Now, Vox, along with a lot of other people on the alt-right, like to claim that it would be achieved by peaceful ethnic cleansing. As if that's a thing.
Return them to their homelands. You know, there are something like 57 different Muslim states. There's plenty of land. There's plenty of place for people to be peacefully relocated. That would be ideal. Nationalism is an absolute necessity for peace.
And indeed, so committed to non-violent political change is Vox Day that he constantly attacks the left for their use of violence.
Because it's really not acceptable. It's not acceptable for people to be trying to engage in these sort of intimidating tactics. And what we are finding is that the SJW left, there's no place for them in Western civilization. They're not civilized people. While you're out in the middle of a bunch of left-wing SJW rioting, violent mobsters who are going to attack you simply because you happen to have a Trump sticker on your car.
So then, Vox, as such a firm opponent of political violence, I suppose you would never support white nationalist violence, right?
That is not going to stop until we see a revival of Christianity, a Reconquista 2.0. It's sink the damn ships. Don't let them in. So somebody asked, are you in favor of punching journos? I personally would be in favor of the God Emperor impaling the entire White House press corps in the Rose Garden.
Yeah. And the pièce de résistance to his pro-violence hypocrisy would be his support for neo-Nazi mass-murdering terrorist prick Anders Behring Breivik.
I'll come right out and say it. Breivik will be one of Europe's greatest national heroes within 100 years. You know, the phrase that I often use, Saint Breivik, pray for us. I said that when this is all over, in 100 years or so, that there will very likely be statues to Anders Breivik all across Europe.
So Vox wants us to be outraged that Richard Spencer got punched in the face, but also wants us to canonise and erect statues to Anders Breivik, who killed 77 people, most of whom were children. Yeah, they seriously want us to believe that they would be doing peaceful ethnic cleansing. Fuck off.
6. The alt-right is anti-globalist. It opposes all groups who work for globalist ideals or globalist objectives.
Yeah, he's rather fond of throwing the term globalist around very fucking loosely at basically anyone who disagrees with the alt-right in any way whatsoever.
And the people who are responsible for it are the people who encouraged multiculturalism and globalism. You know, what's interesting to me is that for the past, I would say 100 years, the trend has been very much pro-globalism. Globalism, telling off the globalists, these stupid globalists.
Yeah, he does that a lot. Well, basically, point 6 is nothing, okay? Because I have still yet to hear any kind of actual complete, or even fucking vaguely complete, definition of what globalism even is from these alt-right shitgibbons. So, until they can actually define what globalism is, and therefore what makes a person a globalist, this point can be dismissed as the smear tactic that it obviously is. And no, alt-rightists, vague hand-waving about George Soros or something like that will not suffice, okay? If you want this point to be taken seriously, define your fucking terms.
7. The alt-right is anti-equalitarian. It rejects the idea of equality for the same reason it rejects the ideas of unicorns and leprechauns, noting that human equality does not exist in any observable scientific, legal, material, intellectual, sexual, or spiritual form.
Take note, all you anti-SJW so-called egalitarians. You probably ought not be throwing your weight behind these people, if you are in fact, for equality, as you claim. Also, Vox, how the fuck would one judge equality in a spiritual form? You fundy fuckwit.
Number 8. The alt-right is scientific. It presumptively accepts the current conclusions of the scientific method, scientity.
No, it most assuredly fucking isn't, and you reveal the loophole that you use to try and get out of your anti-science stances in a moment.
While understanding, A, these conclusions are liable to future revision, B, that scientistry is susceptible to corruption, and C, that the so-called scientific consensus is not based on scientity but democracy and is therefore intrinsically unscientific.
And there we go. So any scientific study that comes out that disagrees with the alt-right in any way whatsoever, so, maybe a study comes out and suggests that man-made global warming is real, or, one that suggests that the bell curve is a lot of all fucking nonsense, or one that suggests that white people aren't entirely racially superior, or something like that. Yeah, the alt-right can use that little loophole that he just tried to create there to escape the fact that, they're completely against science by suggesting that basically this was corrupt data from globalist Jews or whatever. And they can then go on and ignore all of that scientific information, even though it totally destroys their entire fucking worldview. Yeah, remember earlier when I was talking about their psychological self-defense coping mechanism? Yeah, there it is, in a nutshell.
9. The alt-right believes identity is greater than culture, is greater than politics.
Again, as with the globalism point, this one is basically fucking meaningless, because those three things are so intertwined that I don't know you can really separate them sufficiently enough to put them in some sort of order like that, really. So basically Vox is talking shit, so let's move on to the next point.
10. The alt-right is opposed to the rule or domination of any native ethnic group by another, particularly in the sovereign homelands of the dominated peoples.
So you hear that, white North Americans? You're gonna have to fucking leave, as those are the native homelands of the First Nations peoples. Which basically means that, according to Vox, the alt-right stands for its own expulsion from its lands of birth. So, to Vox Day and Richard Spencer and their ilk, why are you so against the white people of America?
Anti-white! 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 Anti-white!
Well, if the cap fits, guys.
The alt-right is opposed to any non-native ethnic group obtaining excessive influence in any society through nepotism,
So that's bye-bye to the Trump family.
tribalism, or any other means.
So that would mean the expulsion of white people from America, Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand and various other places. I mean, do I have to play the anti-white chant clip again? Because I think it would be more than appropriate, wouldn't it? Jesus fucking Christ.
11. The alt-right understands that diversity plus proximity equals war.
Yeah, this is a talking point he likes to use very often.
We all know the equation diversity plus proximity equals war. Is that diversity plus proximity equals war. What matters is that diversity plus proximity equals war.
But the thing is, Vox, diversity isn't needed for war. Just people, okay? I mean, wars actually start between members of the same racial, religious and ethnic groups, so clearly it isn't diversity that's needed, it's just people being people.
12. The alt-right doesn't care what you think of it.
If that were true, why do you put yourselves out there? Why do you try and win support? I mean, clearly you do care what people think of you. Look, just fucking stop it with this psychological self-defense mechanism fucking bullshit, okay? As I said earlier, learn to deal with shit like an adult, for fuck's sake.
13. The alt-right rejects international free trade and the free movement of peoples that free trade requires. The benefits of intranational free trade is not evidence for the benefits of international free trade.
Well, I covered this one earlier when I talked about the difference between the alt-right and libertarianism. They like the economic slavery aspect of it, but not the free movement of people, the immigration, because, you know, racial purity.
14. The alt-right believes we must secure the existence of white people and a future for white children.
And here the mask slips. Now the alt-right, Vox included, gets exceptionally butthurt when you call them Nazis.
The so-called Anti-Defamation League has put out a little hit list of 36 people from the alt-right and the alt-light that they are attempting to smear as white supremacists and anti-Semites. They call Milo Yiannopoulos a Nazi. They call me a Nazi. I'm an American Indian. They call Cernovich a Nazi. They call everybody a Nazi. Yeah, I mean, they run around saying that the alt-right are Nazis. I'm alt-right. I'm not a Nazi.
But the thing is, Vox, you just wrote that the alt-right, you included therefore, support the 14 words. Now, for those who don't know, the 14 words is a mantra used by neo-Nazis and white supremacists the world over.
It most often reads as, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." And as you can see, this screenshot is from the website of the American Nazi Party, which really should tell you something, Vox. But anyways, the reference to the number 14 is what you will see in the 1488 number that far-right arseholes will post on the internet. The 88 standing for Heil Hitler, as H is the 8th letter of the alphabet. I mean, just look at all these fucking examples of Nazis using the 14 words and references to them. They seem rather fond of the phrase too, Vox. Now, the 14 words themselves were originally coined by neo-Nazi David Lane, but the phrase itself is merely a reworking of a quote from Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, which reads, "What we must fight for is to safeguard the existence and reproduction of our race and our people, the sustenance of our children, and the purity of our blood."
So Vox, regardless of how much whinging you want to do about people calling you a Nazi, the reason they call you a Nazi is because you're a fucking Nazi.
15. The alt-right does not believe in the general supremacy of any race, nation, people, or subspecies.
Subspecies? I mean, what the actual fuck? Also, as for not believing in racial supremacy, that's obviously untrue. Also, Vox, you personally seem to have something of a disdain for Jewish people.
The Anglo-American establishment has, clearly allied with the Jewish elite. They don't understand politics. They don't understand rhetoric. Half of them are Jewish agent provocateurs. From the usual suspects, we've got the "it's another Holocaust" sort of thing. One of the Jewish leaders even said that it is the worst anti-Jewish act in Europe since National Socialism. And people wonder why we don't take the Jews seriously. The U.S. Jews are not part of the American nation, and they never have been.
Your mask slipped again, you Nazi fuck.
Every race, nation, people, and human subspecies has its own unique strengths and weaknesses, and possesses the sovereign right to dwell unmolested in the native culture it prefers.
Yeah, this is the psychological self-defense mechanism kicking in again. This is basically the alt-right's way of dealing with the fact that if you look at certain areas of culture and of life, like, for instance, major sporting leagues and events around the world, you'll find that black folk tend to be rather significantly overrepresented.
In fact, the marquee event of the entire Olympic Games, the 100 metres, is the perfect sign that maybe, just maybe, white people aren't entirely genetically superior as a race. In fact, of the 124 men to have ever recorded a sub-10 second mark for the 100 metres, only one, Christophe Lemaitre of France, was white. So the alt-right has had to try and find a way of dealing with the fact that 123 out of those 124 men were not white. So they come up with some poor attempt at political correctness, ironically enough, to say that, well, all races have different qualities, blah blah blah.
16. The alt-right is a philosophy that values peace among the various nations of the world and opposes wars to impose the values of one nation upon another, as well as efforts to exterminate individual nations through war, genocide, immigration, or genetic assimilation.
Yeah, I think we've all seen how much you value peace between peoples. I mean, was Anders Breivik slaughtering 77 innocent people, many of whom he shot in the back as they tried to swim away? Was that your idea of peace, dickhead? And as for the alt-right not supporting genocide, well, you might want to tell that to all the pricks on your side who constantly make reference to starting a second Holocaust, because they very much seem to disagree with you. So all in all, Vox, you're very much full of shit.
TLDR. The alt-right is a Western ideology that believes in science, history, reality, and the right of a genetic nation to exist and govern itself in its own interests.
I think we've all seen by now that the alt-right does not believe in science, history, or reality. Also, Vox, what in the name of Jesus hates shitbags is a genetic nation exactly? I mean, you are a fucking lunatic. But anyways, let's wrap this shit up, because I've had more than enough of Vox for a fucking lifetime, frankly. Some of the things I didn't get around to mentioning include the fact that he is a massive transphobe, but frankly his views on that are so sort of hackneyed and unoriginal that I've basically covered them in this series already, and you basically know what they are if you take any interest in that topic at all. He also attempted to justify the Taliban shooting Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani child, in the face. His justification for that being that educated women were bad for civilization, therefore it was okay for a terrorist group to attempt to murder a child by shooting her in the face. I mean, if anything goes to show just what a fucking utter scumbag Vox Day is, it would be that. What else? He also said that Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, was worse than Adolf Hitler. I wonder why people think he's a Nazi. baffling, isn't it? And also he was a part of Gamergate. I mean, I wonder what it was about Gamergate that attracted this right-wing, money-obsessed demagogue. It's absolutely baffling stuff, isn't it?
And an enormous thank you goes to both Michael Rowlands and Steve Shibes for their indispensable vocal talents. Both of their channels are linked below. Go and check them out immediately.
But anyways, with all of that out of the way, said and done, there's just one thing left for me to say. And never before has this been more justified than on this occasion. Vox Day. Go fuck yourself.